Daenerys stood at one of the high windows in the palace of Astapor, a city reborn under her aegis. She gazed into the distance, watching the bustle below, where freedmen moved with a fervor of purpose. Newly constructed arches and spires reflected the fierce desert sun. The open spaces teemed with activity, and overhead soared several dragons on their daily circuit. Astapor had transformed since Daenerys first took it from slavers. Freedmen's councils now governed, the cruel training pits lay in ruins, and the bay thronged with ships bearing crimson and black sails. Though she took pride in how quickly Slavers' Bay had fallen under her dominion, and that of Varos, she could not ignore the faint unease coiling in her heart. That sense that it was all happening too fast, that something deeper stirred beyond her control. She exhaled, turning her attention to the reflecting glass of a polished metal sconce. The face that stared back was calm, regal, her silver-gold hair pinned in an elegant style that displayed her neck and shoulders. She wore a light gown of pale linen suitable for Astapor's heat, embroidered with the combined sigils that had come to dominate Slavers' Bay. Her Targaryen dragon, subtly merged with the swirling flame emblem Varos had introduced from ancient Valyria. In less than a year, she had gone from liberating these cities with a handful of dragons to presiding over an army so vast that even the freedmen could scarcely believe it. Dragons now arrived weekly from enclaves Varos claimed to have restored near the Smoking Sea, and rumors spoke of more legionnaires on the way, Valyrian men and women ready to serve a resurrected empire under Daenerys' queenship. Or so everyone believed. She still shuddered at the memory of Meereen's rebellious enclaves, quickly brought to heel by unstoppable draconic might. A soft knock at the open arch drew her out of her musings. She turned to see Jon Snow, who approached with a respectful inclination of his head. "You summoned me, Daenerys?" he said quietly, using her name without titles when they were alone, something she allowed. His dark hair, cut shorter since the days of the Great War against the White Walkers, was beginning to curl at the ends. He still favored his leathers, though he had adapted them to Astapor's climate, donning lighter layers in black and a discreet red trim that signaled he belonged among Daenerys' new Valyrian hosts. "Yes," Daenerys replied, beckoning him closer. "I needed to speak with you, Jon. There's something I've noticed in Astapor these past few weeks. The Lord of Light's worship, no, not just worship, but entire communities, are springing up everywhere. Red priests flood the streets, proclaiming that we, or rather Varos, are the chosen heralds of a new epoch. Freedmen are flocking to their sermons, enthralled by the promise of a divine new Valyria. It happens so quickly it leaves me uneasy." Jon came forward, resting his hands on the windowsill. "You aren't alone in that feeling. I've walked the streets daily, Daenerys. I see freedmen praising R'hlloreth's flame, repeating Varos's mantras about cleansing the old world. They seem entranced, as if they found a new salvation. And, well, your rule overcame the slavers so rapidly that freedmen are eager for any cause that cements their freedom. Perhaps turning to the Lord of Light's teachings is a natural step. Still, it does make me wonder who truly leads this realm, you or Varos. Some freedmen treat him like a living saint, the harbinger of R'hllor." She nodded, letting out a small sigh. "Exactly. When I arrived here, it was my dragons, my cause, that ended the slavers' grip. Yet Varos soon revealed his token force of 50,000 Valyrian elites at Winterfell, and then he tripled that force once we secured Slavers' Bay. Now, with each passing month, more of his men flood in, along with dragons I never even knew existed. Freedmen and local lords alike see him as unstoppable, like a walking myth. Meanwhile, I stand as the named queen. But do I truly command? Or does Varos shape everything from behind the scenes?" Jon stared out over the city. "It's not a simple question, Daenerys. Varos claimed from the start that the Lord of Light showed him a vision, that you were the rightful breaker of chains, that together you'd forge an empire of fire and liberation. You accepted his help in Slavers' Bay, and it worked wonders. But yes, I see how it sometimes feels like we're living in his prophecy, not our own plan." She wrapped her arms around herself, shoulders tense. "I needed him to defeat the slavers swiftly, to quell rebellion with minimal bloodshed, to gather freedmen. but I never intended to surrender my moral judgment. Lately, the freedmen seem more enthralled with Varos's flame than with the freedmen's counsels I championed. I can't help but think, if a conflict arises between what I judge right and what Varos deems the will of R'hllor, whose command will the freedmen follow? Jon exhaled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We can't let fear guide us. You do have dragons of your own, the original 3, Drogon, Regal, Viserion, and freedman loyalty is largely thanks to your record of freeing slaves. Varos has augmented that loyalty with religious fervor, but I doubt freedmen would turn on you easily. The question is how to balance that against Varos's unstoppable drive. If he's a force of nature, as we've been saying, how do you tether a storm? She let out a half-laugh, half-sigh. A storm indeed, yet we must not show doubt to the freedmen. I called you here because we must keep watch. If Varos's ambitions lead us somewhere we never intended, like forcibly converting every city in Essos to the Lord of Light, will we stand by? I wish to liberate men from slavery, not chain them to a single creed. Before Jon could respond, the sound of measured footfalls echoed through the corridor. Daenerys glanced at the archway, a mild scowl flitting across her face. She recognized those footsteps, Varos's. His presence carried a certain resonance, as though the air warmed subtly whenever he approached. She turned, schooling her features into a polite mask, while Jon stepped back to give her space. Varos entered, robes of black and crimson drifting around him, a subtle flame motif embroidered along the sleeves. Flanking him were 4 of his personal guard, elite warriors in dark scale armor, each bearing a short spear crowned with what appeared to be crystallized obsidian tips. They radiated an otherworldly discipline, not quite like the Unsullied, but close in their silent synchronization. Daenerys Stormborn, Varos greeted, bowing with effortless grace. Jon Snow, he nodded curtly to Jon. I trust I'm not intruding. I came to speak with you both about a matter of high importance. There is a guest who arrived under the hush of night. I believe you'll be quite surprised. Daenerys exchanged a quick look with Jon, recalling their conversation about Varos's influence. She forced a civil smile. Not at all, Varos. We were only discussing the freedmen's progress. A guest, you say? From where? Varos's eyes gleamed with a hint of satisfaction. From what remains of the Night's Watch, or so I discovered. I took certain measures to keep an eye on Westeros after the White Walkers' defeat. My watchers came upon a figure of interest near Eastwatch by the Sea, traveling alone. He bears the name Aemon Targaryen. Shock flickered across Daenerys' face. She had known a Maester Aemon in her father's era, or at least by story, but that man was rumored to have died decades ago. Aemon Targaryen? You must be mistaken. Or do you mean a descendant, some lost Targaryen from a hidden line? Varos gestured subtly, and his personal guard parted, revealing a hooded figure stepping into the chamber. The man, though somewhat stooped, carried a dignity in his bearing. Pulling back his hood, he revealed silver hair and pale, watery eyes that shone with quiet intellect. He wore simple black robes reminiscent of the Night's Watch, though frayed from travel. He offered a faint, almost tremulous smile. I fear I am no descendant, but the very Aemon Targaryen once stationed at Castle Black. Rumors of my death were exaggerated. Or, in truth, I did pass from the world's eyes, but not from life. Jon took an involuntary step forward, voice barely above a whisper. Aemon, I recall the name as belonging to a venerable maester of the Night's Watch, said to have died in old age. This can't be the same man. He'd be impossibly ancient. Aemon gave a gentle shrug. I have lived far beyond what is normal, it's true. Some say the blood of the dragon can gift unusual lifespans. Others claim the Lord of Light or the Seven extended my years for a purpose not yet fulfilled. Regardless, I remain, though I have been absent from the Watch for a considerable time. The Wall is not what it once was, especially after the White Walkers' defeat. Many men deserted or found new allegiances. I wandered, seeking to record the true song of ice and fire, so that men might not forget what nearly destroyed us. Daenerys came closer, studying the creases lining Aemon's face. She felt a trembling sense of kinship. "You're of Targaryen blood, truly Aemon Targaryen? My father was your relative, then. Or no, my father was King Aerys. You would be his uncle or great-uncle. I can't recall the exact lineage, but you served the Night's Watch for decades." The older man gave a soft, wry smile. "Yes, child. I was once second to Maester at Castle Black. I turned away from the throne long ago, devoting myself to the realm's safety. But as the White Walkers rose, I feared for all living souls. The war ended unexpectedly, and I soon found that the Watch, battered and leaderless, had little place for an old Targaryen like me. So I made my way south. But the days of easy travel were gone, and I found myself drifting. Varos's agents picked me up before I could starve or freeze." Varos stepped forward, gesturing for Aemon to rest upon a cushioned seat. "He arrived in Astapor only yesterday, hidden in one of my caravans. I believed it best to reveal him in private, lest the freedmen become confused about yet another Targaryen. I trust this is acceptable, Daenerys?" She nodded absently, mind racing with the implications. Another Targaryen, apparently ancient, with knowledge of the Night's Watch and the old struggles. "Of course. Thank you, Varos, for bringing him here safely. Aemon, I am grateful to meet you. I'd heard tales of a wise maester at the Wall, a last scion of an older Targaryen line. I never dreamt you lived still." Aemon returned her gaze with fondness. "For many years, I lived among the crows, believing my time had passed. But I suspect the gods or fate decided otherwise. The story is not done. Men speak of the Song of Ice and Fire, some prophecy that the rightful Targaryen would save the realm from darkness. The White Walkers' defeat proved something was set in motion, but I see now that life continues to be complicated. The presence of so many dragons in Slaver's Bay, the forging of a new empire, the mention of a lord named Varos who harnesses ancient powers. It all suggests the song has multiple verses yet to be sung." Jon exhaled softly, hearing those old words again. Song of Ice and Fire. He recalled Melisandre's claims, the struggles in the north, how Daenerys' arrival turned the tide. "We did indeed face a terror beyond imagination. The dead nearly triumphed, but for our unity and the dragon's flame. Now we shape a new order in Essos. Aemon, your presence might be a sign that we must not forget how easily mortal conflicts can overshadow a greater cosmic threat." Aemon's gaze warmed. "Wise words. War among men can blind us to lurking evils. We should remain vigilant. Yet I must confess, I came with Varos not simply to confirm you were building a free realm, Daenerys, but also to see whether these new powers, Varos's arcane knowledge, your dragons, could guard the living against future shadows. The darkness is never fully vanquished." Daenerys placed a gentle hand on Aemon's. "If you wish, you may stay here in Astapor or travel with us as we expand. We have freedmen's councils and new structures to unify men. If the Great Other or some new horror stirs, we must face it with a realm not drowned in petty squabbles. That is partly why we do not shy from forging a new empire." Varos's calm voice interjected. "Indeed, the Lord of Light's flame reveals glimpses of cosmic struggles. We overcame the Night King, but the Song of Ice and Fire continues. Aemon might help us recall the lessons of the North, so we do not repeat mistakes if further abominations arise." Jon studied Varos's face. "And what of your own ambitions, Varos? You brought Aemon here, yes, but does that further your plan to spread the Lord of Light's domain? We were just discussing how quickly you swayed Astapor to the Red Faith. Freedmen burn with zeal after you vanquished the slavers so decisively. Are you content letting Daenerys lead, or do you steer the course from behind the scenes?" Varos blinked, the question direct. His personal guard stood behind him, silent. "Jon Snow, I understand your concern. Since the day we revealed our powers in the North, you have watched me with caution. But let me assure you, I do not seek a throne. Daenerys is queen, the living symbol of Targaryen lineage entwined with freed souls. I serve the prophecy that Lawler set in motion. If freedmen revere me, it's because they see in me a messenger of flame, not a king. We have thrived together, forging this empire in record time. Why suspect me of subversion now? Jon held Varos's gaze. Because you move with a force that surpasses typical mortal ambition. You dispatch priests, you harness enclaves of old Valyria, you overshadow freedmen with your miracles. Daenerys wonders who truly commands. She has the dragons, but you seem unstoppable in your convictions. If your will diverges from hers, how would we decide the realm's course? A moment of tension crackled. Aemon watched intently, silent. Daenerys placed a calming hand on Jon's arm, addressing Varos. Varos, we do not accuse you of disloyalty, but all the freedmen revere you almost like a deity. I must be certain we remain in harmony. We sought to free men from chains, not chain them to a single creed. If your beliefs in R'hllor push us to extremes, I will resist. Varos let out a slow breath, expression unwavering. Daenerys Stormborn, I pledged my flame to your cause. I have not forced freedmen to worship R'hllor with violence, nor have I dethroned your freedmen's councils. My power stands behind your rulings. The freedmen worship the Lord of Light because it resonates with their newfound liberation. The old gods of their slavers offered no deliverance. But I will not contest your authority. If men see me as an unstoppable force, it is only because the Lord of Light's plan is unstoppable, and I am its herald. Yet you remain the queen, the bringer of freedom. Our synergy remains the realm's bedrock. Her tension eased somewhat. That synergy is precious. Let it remain so. A divided leadership could unravel everything. We faced the White Walkers united. The same unity must persist for the battles or expansions ahead. Aemon cleared his throat, softly. I sense no immediate schism, but caution is wise. The Targaryens of old Valyria learned that arrogance precedes doom. The freedmen might have replaced the old dragon's tyranny, but if we let pride corrupt us, the cycle repeats. Let this song of ice and fire be one of harmony, not discord. You speak of forging an empire that stands as a bulwark against future evils. Then do so with humility. Varos's mouth curved into a half-smile, acknowledging Aemon's counsel. Your words ring true, Maester. We will heed them. Jon took the lull in conversation to shift the focus. Aemon, how do you feel about all this? Are you unsettled by the freedmen's devotion to a new faith, or the presence of so many dragons? The Night's Watch always taught neutrality in such matters. Aemon clasped his hands in front of him, the age lines on his face deepening. I am no longer bound by the Watch's old vows. The Watch itself stands in ruins, from what I saw. Perhaps a handful remain at the wall, but the threat of White Walkers ended, and many crows scattered. I see a world in flux, with Essos forging a new empire under Targaryen leadership. I find it astonishing but not wholly unwelcome. My only advice is never to forget that power must serve life. If we become enthralled by might for might's sake, we shall birth a new horror. Daenerys nodded, grateful. Then remain with us as an advisor, Aemon. Your wisdom might be a beacon in uncertain times. We have freedmen's councils guiding local governance, but we also need philosophical counsel on a broader scale. Someone who remembers what monarchy once was, and how it can fail. The old man's watery eyes shone. It would honor me to serve, if only my failing years permit. I had thought my story finished. Perhaps the gods, or R'hllor, or the Seven decreed otherwise. Let me see if I can help keep Targaryen might from overshadowing Targaryen compassion. Jon offered a slight smile, placing a hand on Aemon's shoulder. The weight of those words resonated. Meanwhile, Varos nodded with solemn acceptance, gleaning that bridging the gap between old Targaryen knowledge and freedmen's new faith might be paramount to sustaining their empire. Moments later, a freedman guard approached, stepping cautiously into the room. He bowed deeply, addressing Daenerys. Your Grace, the City Watch requests your presence in the outer courtyard. A small commotion. A group of freedmen challenge a Valyrian officer about taxes for building new shrines. They fear forced tithes to the Lord of Light. We seek your judgment. Daenerys exchanged a look with Jon, Varos, and Aemon. Here we see how swiftly changes bring conflict. Freedmen worry they'll be coerced to support Varos's religion. Let's go. She turned to Eamon, who still looked weary from travel. Please, rest if you need. We'll handle this quickly. You're always welcome in my council. Eamon gave a gentle grin. I'll accompany you, if it's not too taxing. I wish to observe how you resolve such disputes. Daenerys nodded. Very well. Let's go. She strode from the chamber, leading them through wide corridors lit by braziers. Guards, freedmen, and a few red priests milling about all bowed or nodded. The synergy and tension in the halls reminded Daenerys that each day tested the equilibrium between multiple factions. Though freedmen claimed to hold power through councils, the presence of dragons and the unstoppable aura of Valyria overshadowed every decision. They emerged into a broad courtyard paved with worn stones, overshadowed by scaffolding for a partially completed colonnade. A gathering of freedmen, perhaps a dozen, stood in a heated argument with a stern-faced Valyrian officer. The freedmen wore simple tunics, embroidered with small tokens signifying their trades. The officer was clad in black scale armor, trimmed with dark red, carrying a short sword at his hip. Around them hovered a handful of freedmen legionnaires, uncertain how to calm the dispute. As Daenerys approached, a hush fell. All eyes swung to her, then flicked to Varos, Jon, and Aemon at her side. The freedmen parted with deference. One stepped forward, a middle-aged woman with a determined stance. Your Grace, we beg your ear. This officer, she indicated the Valyrian with a curt wave, demands we pay coin to fund building shrines to R'hllor. He says it's a communal tithe, mandatory for all freedmen in Astapor. We do not oppose the Lord of Light, but we resent F. The officer frowned, but bowed to Daenerys out of respect. Your Grace, the new temple expansions require resources. Varos's priests deem it essential to anchor the flame of R'hllor across Slaver's Bay. Freedmen benefit from the new order. It's only fair they contribute. A stirring of indignation crossed the freedmen's group. One man muttered about not exchanging one tyranny for another. Daenerys's expression hardened slightly. She glanced at Varos, who kept his face neutral. She addressed the freedman calmly. No freedman is forced to worship R'hllor. Our laws do not impose a single creed. Correct? If you freely donate to the cause, that is your choice. If not, no penalty shall come by force. Our realm does not revolve around forced piety. Relief flickered across the freedmen's faces. The officer bristled, retorting, but the Lord of Light is the guiding flame of this new empire. Without the red priests, freedmen might still languish in darkness. It is not undue to ask they pay a portion of their earnings to further the faith that liberated them. Varos raised a hand, stepping in. Captain Saran, we must recall our Queen's principle. Freedmen stand as equals, not forced subjects for any dogma. The flame is a gift. If they do not wish to pay for shrines, we do not coerce. The priests shall rely on voluntary donations, or the Empire's general treasury if needed, but never a forced tithe. Do you understand? The officer looked momentarily displeased, but he recognized Varos's authority and Daenerys' station. He bowed. Of course, my lord, your grace. I only sought to ensure our faith did not languish. I apologize if my zeal was misconstrued. Daenerys fixed him with a measured gaze. Zeal is welcome, but remember, freedmen are free in every sense. The red priests may build shrines, but not by mandatory taxes. We unify under shared liberation, not forced conversions. The freedman woman who had spoken earlier placed a hand over her heart. Thank you, your grace. We only wanted to preserve the freedom we hold dear. Many do worship R'hllor happily, but let it be by choice. A murmur of agreement arose from the freedmen's group. Daenerys nodded, turning to address them as a whole. Go in peace. No forced tithes will be collected. If any officer or priest attempts such a demand again, bring it to the Freedmen's Council or to me. We stand by the principle of freedom from compulsion. They bowed, satisfied. The crowd dispersed, the freedmen returning to their tasks. The Valyrian officer, contrite, saluted Varos and Daenerys before withdrawing, evidently chastened. That left the four alone again, now joined by a silent hush in the courtyard. Eamon's gaze sparkled with a mixture of admiration and caution. "You handled that with wisdom, my queen," he said softly, addressing Daenerys by a respectful term. "It reminds me that any faith, if unchecked, can impose tyranny under the guise of piety." Varos's posture relaxed. "I regret that Captain Saran overstepped. The faith's fervor is genuine, but we must guide it carefully. Our cause is not to enthrall freedmen. My own priests know the difference between free worship and forced devotion. Still, zeal can lead some astray." Jon let out a slow breath. "Hence the question we keep circling. Varos, you introduced a powerful creed. Freedmen leap to embrace it, but we must ensure it doesn't become a new chain. I see, though, that you personally corrected him, which is a relief." Varos nodded, meeting Jon's eyes. "Yes, I did. Believe me, I do not aim to overshadow Daenerys's rule with the Lord of Light's creed. The flame is a beacon. Freedmen flock to it because they find hope, not because we beat them into submission. If a few overzealous souls misinterpret that, we correct them. That's how we maintain unity without tyranny." Aemon studied the interplay, drawing a thoughtful hum from his aged throat. "It is well that you intervene swiftly, lest the freedmen become pawns yet again, worshipping a faith they barely understand. In my youth, Targaryens soared high with dragons too, and sometimes arrogance took hold. Resist that path and you might craft a truly just empire." Daenerys offered him a grateful nod. "We shall. I want no illusions. The freedmen must remain at the heart of our new order. The building of these grand dragon pits across Slaver's Bay is for safety, not intimidation. We refuse to become another monstrous power." Varos shifted, stepping forward a pace, gesturing for them to walk with him across the courtyard. "Let us proceed inside, then. There is more to discuss: Volantis, your next steps in Meereen, and the arrival of certain Valyrian enclaves who remain suspicious of freedmen's counsels. We must unify our messages." The group traversed the courtyard, stepping around stonemasons and freedmen discussing architectural plans. A few paused to bow deeply to Daenerys, who smiled in acknowledgement. Others spared anxious glances at Varos, the aura of the Lord of Light swirling around him. Aemon walked quietly, absorbing every detail of a city that once inflicted cruelty, but now thrived under Daenerys's principles. The memory of forced tithes for a religion that freedmen only half understood lingered in their thoughts. They returned to the palace's grand hall, where the combined sigils, the triple-headed dragon merged with stylized flame, draped from tall pillars. Daenerys led them to a small lounge off to the side, one ringed with cushioned benches and low tables. Servants, freedmen themselves, brought pitchers of cool water and plates of sliced fruits. The desert sun streamed through the narrow windows, giving the space a warm glow. They settled in a casual circle. Daenerys took a seat on a bench, Jon beside her, while Varos gracefully sank onto another bench across from them. Aemon, though old, lowered himself with surprising steadiness, courtesy of an offered hand from Jon. Once they were comfortable, Daenerys addressed Varos more directly. "About Volantis. Now that the freedmen here are stable, we might proceed. But we must ensure that freedmen do not suspect another forced religious push. The last thing we want is rumors that the new empire extends by spiritual conquest. Let them see it as liberation from slavery, not a demand for faith." Varos nodded, sipping from a small cup of water. "I concur. The priests we sent to Volantis are only to share knowledge of R'hllor, not to forcibly convert. If the Triarchs remain obstinate about slavery, well, we have other means to apply pressure. But from what we glean, there are factions in Volantis that already revere the Lord of Light. They might welcome us as liberators or fear us as conquerors. We will not truly know unless we risk contact." Aemon's eyes flicked between them. "Do you intend a grand campaign of dragons to Volantis, or a measured approach?" Daenerys considered. "For now, a measured approach. Let them know we do not intend to ravage them if they simply abandon slavery. My hope is they'll realize how quickly Slaver's Bay fell, how freedmen embraced our cause. If they resist, we stand ready with the might of dragons and the freedmen's legions." but we'd prefer they yield peacefully. So many freedmen in Volantis deserve liberation, not a siege that kills thousands. Jon rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. We can't hide the fact that if they refuse, we might enforce it. That's the reality. The freedmen's councils at home see no hypocrisy if we expand to free more slaves. As for the freedmen in Volantis, they might rise up if they sense we'll aid them. But that's speculation. Some Triarch might call upon Lys or Myr for support. Tensions could escalate. Varos spoke in a measured tone. I have faith that if the Triarchs see our power, they'll not risk an open war. The memory of the White Walkers might also linger in tales, reminding them we overcame an even greater darkness. But that is their choice. Let us prepare for both outcomes. Aemon folded his hands over his lap, expression calm. Your strategy seems consistent with the moral imperative you champion. Yet I counsel you again, do not let your own illusions blind you. Men can rationalize atrocities in the name of righteousness. Keep your freedmen free from zealotry, else they become an instrument of tyranny. Daenerys gave a faint smile of appreciation. I hear you, Aemon. We can hold to the principle that no freedman is forced to worship R'hllor or to fight beyond reason. The freedmen's legions will remain a volunteer force guided by discipline, not fear. If we maintain that line, we might avoid becoming the very evil we replaced. Varos tilted his head slightly, regarding them. Then we are in agreement. We push forward with caution in Volantis. The freedmen's councils remain the bedrock in Slaver's Bay, ensuring daily governance. The new Valyrian enclaves we welcomed must see that freedmen are not their subjects but equals in forging this empire. The Red Priest spread the flame, but we do not coerce. All these threads must remain in balance. Jon parted his lips. What of Westeros, though? We keep hearing no word from Robert, no envoy. Are we certain he's not building a fleet to cross the narrow sea if he feels threatened? Daenerys shrugged, a flicker of sadness crossing her eyes. We can't be certain. I only know that if he tries to challenge us, freedmen might see it as an old king defending archaic thrones. But I do not yearn to fight Robert. War with the Seven Kingdoms is not our goal. If we expand, it's to ensure no corner of Essos remains chained. That is enough. They fell quiet, each lost in private thoughts. The conversations throughout the day had reaffirmed the path they walked, continuing to unify Slaver's Bay, building the Grand Dragon pits for all the new beasts, ensuring freedmen welcomed the realm's transformations without succumbing to fanaticism. Meanwhile, a measured extension of influence into Volantis loomed on the horizon. The entire world, it seemed, balanced on the shoulders of Daenerys Targaryen, Varos's unstoppable faith in R'hllor, and the freedmen's hopes for permanent emancipation. A messenger soon arrived, bowing with mild urgency. He whispered something to Daenerys, who nodded, then turned to her companions. The freedmen's councils in Meereen request my presence in 2 days' time to finalize some infrastructure projects. I'll go, taking a small retinue and a couple of dragons for swift travel. Aemon, if you wish to see more of this empire, you might come along. Jon, you're welcome too, or you can remain in Astapor to coordinate with Varos. Jon looked to Varos, then Aemon. I think I'll join you, Daenerys. I'd like to see how the freedmen's councils function on the ground. Aemon might glean more from that visit than from staying here. And Varos can hold Astapor, yes. Varos offered a dip of his head. I shall. The enclaves who just arrived need guidance from me, and there are temple expansions that require my oversight. Go see Meereen's freedmen flourish. I will ensure no crisis arises in Astapor's absence. His voice carried a quiet assurance that left no doubt he felt perfectly capable of safeguarding an entire city by himself if needed. Aemon gave a small smile. Then I shall accompany you both. I am curious to witness more of this freedman's governance. Old age hasn't dulled my yearning for knowledge. With that settled, they parted ways, leaving the hall with a renewed sense of direction. Daenerys and Jon escorted Aemon to prepared guest quarters in the palace's west wing. Simple but comfortable chambers with broad windows that caught the desert's breezes. Varos returned to his duties, summoning some of the new Valyrian aristocrats for further discussions about how Friedman's councils could integrate with arcane knowledge recovered from the Smoking Sea enclaves. The day flowed into a tapestry of tasks, dialogues, and quiet planning for the eventual contact with Volantis. In the late evening, as the desert's heat mellowed into a warm dryness under the star-laced sky, Daenerys found herself walking along one of Astapor's balconies. The city glowed with torchlight in the squares below, freedmen celebrating small festivals or simply reveling in the freedom they once thought impossible. Dragons soared overhead in graceful arcs, occasionally letting out soft roars that echoed across rooftops. Observing this panorama, she felt the magnitude of the new Valyria taking root. She also sensed the caution in her heart. Varos was a force of nature indeed, unstoppable in his convictions. So long as their convictions aligned, freedmen thrived. But would there come a day when that alignment frayed? Jon joined her on the balcony, a small half-smile on his lips. "Enjoying the view, Daenerys?" She nodded, acknowledging his approach. "I am. Despite the concerns, it's beautiful to see freedmen forging their destiny. So different from the horrors we saw in the north, yes." He let out a soft chuckle. "Everything is different from that horror. But also, we can't ignore that the world's always on the brink of new shadows. At least we're trying to build something strong. By the way, how do you feel about Aemon Targaryen staying among us? He's old, but he might carry knowledge beyond measure." Daenerys leaned on the railing, the desert wind tousling strands of her hair. "I see it as a blessing. Another Targaryen, one who lived through eras of heartbreak, might guide me away from pitfalls. He's kind, wise. I feel a kinship, though I barely know him." Jon studied her face. He might also recall the time when Targaryen power overshadowed Westeros. "We must ensure freedmen do not see this as a sign that your lineage confers absolute rule. They should remain free, not enthralled to bloodline mystique." She faced him fully, her voice earnest. "I promise you, Jon, I've no intention of repeating my ancestors' mistakes. Freedmen remain at the heart. This new Valyria stands on moral ground, not ancient entitlements." Jon's shoulders eased. "I believe you." Then he glanced at the silhouettes of dragons passing overhead. "Still, the day might come when Westeros or the Free Cities forces your hand. War might overshadow these ideals." Daenerys swallowed, meeting his gaze. "Then we face it, but not with wanton cruelty. I'll only unleash dragons if forced. So long as freedmen remain free, we do no evil." Jon nodded. "You have my loyalty, Daenerys, as always. If we keep that vow, maybe the realm stands a chance." They lingered there a while, letting the hush of the city cradle them in a moment of calm. Over the next days, Daenerys made preparations for her journey to Meereen, accompanied by Jon, a small retinue of freedmen legionnaires, and Aemon Targaryen. Varos remained in Astapor, dedicating himself to solidifying the new empire's core. The Red Priests had already departed to the Free Cities, sowing seeds of caution or fear among the slavers there. Meanwhile, freedmen in Yunkai and Meereen continued erecting massive dragon enclosures, forging a network that would unify them all. Thus, time advanced steadily, forging a path of cautious optimism. Daenerys prayed that the next challenge, whether from Volantis or a corner of the realm yet unknown, would find her empire unified in compassion, not splintered by conflicting loyalties. The memory of the White Walkers near victory remained a potent reminder that mortal politics paled before cosmic threats, but also that unity could conquer darkness if hearts remained aligned. For now, she stood as queen in a domain shaped by the flame of old Valyria, tempered by the freedmen's thirst for true freedom, and guided, perhaps precariously, by the unstoppable, near-divine impetus of Varos's convictions. Robert Baratheon, first of his name, paced the length of the Red Keep's throne room, his face clouded by tension. The hall's high windows let in a measured wash of daylight, illuminating the dust motes drifting through the air. A legion of courtiers, guards, and foreign dignitaries assembled in hushed expectation, all eyes drawn to the Iron Throne, an ugly mass of melted blades that had once symbolized Targaryen might. For all its storied history, the throne now felt overshadowed by rumors of an even greater power rising in Essos. dragons bigger than Balerion the Dread, Freedman's legions, and the unstoppable sorceries of a figure known only as Varos. Near the base of the throne stood Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, wearing the furs and grays of House Stark despite the southern heat. He kept a solemn vigil, arms crossed over his broad chest. Though he disliked this cramped atmosphere of King's Landing, duty bound him to remain. Robert had summoned him at dawn, announcing that envoys from several free cities would arrive to discuss concerns about Essos' radical transformation under Daenerys Targaryen and her mysterious Valyrian ally. Robert halted, turning to Ned with a frustrated glare. "Seven hells, Ned. I'm half tempted to dismiss these foreign lot altogether. They show up every other month with new panic. Valyria's reborn. Dragons are unstoppable. Freedmen rally under a new queen. Blah blah. It's all gloom and doom. Don't they see we've got enough to manage here without bridging half the world to fight a war we might not even need?" Ned offered a small shrug, meeting Robert's eyes calmly. "I understand, Robert, truly, but this is different. The tales keep growing. Valyrian enclaves once presumed lost have surfaced, plus Varos. Everything points to a might that surpasses the old Targaryen conquests. The free cities might be exaggerating or perhaps not. We do best to hear them and decide, rather than remain ignorant if a threat looms." Robert sighed, resting one hand on the pommel of the warhammer propped beside the throne. Well, we shall see. Summon them forth, then. I'll not waste the entire day coddling these folk, but I'll hear their pleas." A herald signaled with a staff, and the massive oak doors swung wide. A delegation of around a dozen figures entered, bearing various insignias and garments indicative of Braavos, Myr, and Tyrosh, with one or two lesser city-states represented as well. They advanced in a measured line, each bowing as they approached the dais. Whispers among the king's small council rippled along the periphery, the lords of Westeros always uneasy when dealing with the mercantile power of the free cities. Ned stepped down to greet them politely. "Welcome to King's Landing," he said in a clear voice. "You come requesting audience with King Robert, I trust, regarding the developments in Essos." A representative from Braavos, a tall woman named Sierra, stepped forward. Her dark hair was braided with silver threads, and she wore a short cloak in swirling blues. "Lord Stark, King Robert, we bring grave news from across the narrow sea. Volantis, Lys, Myr, Tyrosh, and even Braavos have felt the ripples of this new Targaryen-led empire, or rather, an empire that merges Daenerys' cause with a sorcerer named Varos. They say freedmen flock by the thousands, that dragons fill the skies, that entire cities bow in weeks. We fear that if they choose to expand beyond Slaver's Bay, the free cities may be next. Even now, the Red Priests proclaim the Lord of Light's dominion. We request Westeros' stance, or possible alliance if the threat crosses the sea." Ned, glancing at Robert, nodded for her to continue. The king listened, jaw clenched. Another envoy, hailing from Myr, a short, rotund man named Sarikar, stepped forward next. "Your Grace, the cargo vessels from Myr bring rumors that these dragons dwarf any recorded in history. Some freedmen boast they exceed the size of Balerion the Dread. Could it be nonsense? Perhaps, but enough accounts match. And freedmen's councils or not, if Varos can rouse entire populations under the Lord of Light, who is to say they won't set sail for Westeros eventually, claiming your throne belongs to Targaryens?" A quiet murmur echoed among the assembled lords. One, Lord Merton of the Crownlands, muttered under his breath, "How can we stand against dragons bigger than Balerion? Balerion carved out half the Seven Kingdoms by himself. If these new beasts are truly mightier—" He trailed off in dread. Others nodded uneasily. Robert's face darkened. "Easy, Merton. We have not yet confirmed these claims. Rumors from afar can swell. We Targaryen-slaying rebels once took down 3 full-grown dragons, did we not? Or at least the realm overcame them eventually. But the question remains, do we truly need to meddle in Essos' affairs or posture ourselves for a fight?" Sierra from Braavos bowed slightly. "Your Grace, if they remain in Essos, we might stand aside. Yet the Red Priests now openly preach in the markets of Braavos that a new Valyria shall soon claim the entire East. Some whisper that Westeros is next, that the children of the Dragon Queen remember Robert's rebellion. The Iron Bank remains officially neutral, but tensions rise. We come here to see if you share these concerns. If Varos's empire can unify Essos under a single banner, the balance of power changes forever. Ned exhaled, feeling the eyes of the lords on him. At Winterfell, we once fought alongside Daenerys Targaryen to defeat the White Walkers. She had only 3 dragons then, yet they proved invaluable. If indeed her might has multiplied, we cannot dismiss the possibility that she might eventually look west. But she risked her dragons to save Westeros from the dead, so we cannot brand her a direct enemy without cause. A tall, gaunt envoy from Tyrosh named Rallio snapped, "But she stands not alone. Varos is the key. We hear that freedmen revere him as a living prophet of R'hllor, that the local lords cower before the flame. He expanded Daenerys's small force into an unstoppable legion. If that synergy continues, they might surpass even Aegon the Conqueror's feats, for the freedmen legions greatly outnumber any army Essos has seen in centuries." Lord Renly, stepping forward from the King's Council, interjected with measured courtesy. "Surely we'd hear from Daenerys if she intended to cross the sea. The last we knew, she was content to free slaves and unify Slaver's Bay. Has she sent no envoy to us?" Sierra frowned. "None. The talk is that Daenerys' forces have concluded their business in Meereen and Yunkai, forging new freedmen's councils. But their red priests have traveled to Myr and Lys, proclaiming the end of slavery. Volantis is next. Many lords in Essos fret that if the Triarchs of Volantis refuse to abandon their old ways, war might break out, and we all might be drawn in. So we come to see whether Westeros would support a coalition to resist if Varos or Daenerys turn their eyes beyond the narrow sea." Robert sank onto the iron throne, the metal scraping under his weight. He massaged his brow. "Gods, I thought after the White Walkers we'd have a moment's peace. Now we face the possibility of unstoppable dragons. Ned, do you recall the day we first learned Daenerys had hatched those little beasts? I shrugged it off, told you we'd handle it if she showed up on our shores. But now, dragons bigger than Balerion? That's madness." Ned offered a grim look. "We cannot assume it's mere rumor. If freedmen and enclaves of old Valyria truly collaborate, the scale might be unprecedented. The question stands, do we form an alliance with the free cities to deter them? Or do we wait, hoping Daenerys retains no ill will toward Westeros?" Sarikar from Myr coughed. "If we wait, it may be too late. Our ships might not stand a chance if dragons truly blot out the sky. Many in Myr argue for forging alliances now, units of crossbowmen, fleets, maybe even Sellsword armies from across Essos. But we need Westeros. A realm as large as yours can tip the balance." Lord Merton mumbled again. "Balance, indeed. But if dragons approach King's Landing, can we defend ourselves? Aegon's conquest overcame the entire continent with only 3 dragons. Multiply that many times, and how do we stand a chance?" Robert drummed his fingers on the Iron Throne's arm. "I do not relish another war for the realm. We just recovered from the White Walker threat. People are weary, yet I cannot let a new Valyrian empire overshadow the 7 kingdoms. We have to plan. Let me think. If we unite the Stormlands, the Reach, the Vale, the North, the Iron Islands, and all, that's a formidable host. But can mortal armies truly face an entire brood of dragons?" Ned's expression hardened. "We must recall that unity overcame the White Walkers. Possibly we might replicate that sense of unity if we believe this new empire intends to cross the sea. The freedmen's cause, though, is moral in a sense. They free slaves. Westeros, for the most part, does not practice slavery. Perhaps we can find a diplomatic path. I do not see Daenerys turning on us if we do not provoke her, so long as Varos doesn't manipulate events otherwise." A hush fell as the foreign envoys listened keenly. Rallio from Tyrosh broke the silence. "So you propose a wait-and-see approach? That might leave the rest of Essos at the mercy of Varos's unstoppable armies. If Volantis falls swiftly, they might unify the entire East under a single empire, and that empire may indeed gaze across the sea next." Robert eyed Ned wearily. "I'm no champion of endless parley, but we must weigh if war is winnable. The last time dragons arrived, they were Targaryen exiles with only 3 beasts. Now, by all accounts, they number dozens or hundreds. The freedmen's legions swell daily. If we sign a pact with you to preemptively strike, are we not dooming thousands of Westerosi soldiers to a conflict we might lose? Sierra from Bravos bowed politely. We do not insist on immediate war, Your Grace. We ask if you will stand with us if Varos's empire forcibly extends its domain to the free cities. Bravos has no love for slavery either, but we also value independence. If they impose the Lord of Light or Freedmen's councils upon us, is that freedom or just a new form of dominance? We are prepared to discuss terms for a mutual defense pact. Ned and Robert exchanged a glance. Robert exhaled through gritted teeth. A mutual defense pact, is it? Possibly. We'll not let Essos overshadow us, but we also can't commit blindly. For the time being, let us remain in communication. Let us share intelligence. If your watchers see signs that Daenerys or Varos raise a fleet to cross the Narrow Sea, send ravens swiftly. We in turn will watch the Narrow Sea from our side. That might suffice for now. The foreign envoys murmured among themselves. Sierra nodded. If that is your stance, so be it. We only hope the day never comes when we must face dragons in pitched battle. If we can present a strong front, perhaps Varos will not provoke a war. But if they do, we'd best be ready. Lord Renly chimed in. Westeros stands tall. We overcame the White Walkers with Daenerys' help, ironically, but we also have the capacity to unify if threatened. The lords might prefer peace, but we will not be idle. One of the lords at the council table, Lord Hightower, who had so far remained silent, rose to speak. Your Grace, we must not dismiss the possibility that Daenerys remains friendly. She once fought to save the realm from winter's terror. Could we not send an envoy ourselves to confirm her intentions? Perhaps the same Freedman Empire might disclaim any designs on Westeros. Rumor alone should not lead us to mobilize for war. However, we must also recall the question just raised. How do we stand if Varos truly has dragons bigger than Balerion? Our ancestors bent the knee to Aegon's conquest because of a smaller advantage. Robert rubbed his temple, weighed down by the complexities. I might consider sending an envoy if we had any direct route. But the last we heard, Varos's red priests roam free. A raven might be dismissed, or a messenger might never return. Still, we might attempt a letter, see if they respond. Meanwhile, we wait for new developments from you all, from Mir, from Bravos. Our position remains uncertain, but at least we will not be blind if a threat emerges. Sarikar, appearing somewhat relieved, bowed deeply. We shall carry that message back to our councils. Let it be known that King Robert does not stand idle if dragons menace the seas. We hope a peaceful resolution can be found. But if not, we rely on your realm's might. Robert gave a curt nod. So be it. This session is concluded. We have heard your pleas. We'll maintain vigilant watch. And if the day comes that Varos or Daenerys cross the sea, we shall reevaluate. For now, let us part in civil terms. We have no desire for reckless war, but neither shall we cower if a foreign empire tries to press us. The envoys bowed again, making polite farewells as they withdrew from the throne room, escorted by gold cloaks. A subdued hush remained among the Westerosi lords and courtiers. Ned stepped forward to stand by Robert, voice low. You handled that well enough, Robert. At least we avoided binding ourselves to a hasty conflict. Robert grunted. Yes, but it gnaws at me, Ned. If the tales are true, we might face a force unstoppable. We hammered Targaryens in the rebellion, sure, but only 3 dragons in that line's last gasp. Now freedmen rally to the Targaryen banner, guided by a sorcerer with unstoppable conviction. Let's hope that if they do come, we stand ready. By the gods, I wish we had a sign from Daenerys herself. She helped us once. Maybe she still holds goodwill for the realm. Ned nodded, hand resting on the pommel of the sword at his side. We'll keep watchers in Pentos, might glean more news. Meanwhile, the memory of the White Walkers should remind us not to let petty squabbles hamper unity. I'll send word to every major house. advising them to maintain readiness, though not panic. We must show the free cities we aren't idle, in case they consider us a potential ally or threat. Robert exhaled, sinking back on the Iron Throne's jagged seat. I do it. Gather the lords if needed. Let them remain in their lands but prepared if we ring the call. Let them know we face an uncertain dawn from across the sea. Lord Merton timidly approached once more, bowing. Your Grace, about the question of dragons bigger than Balerion, is there truly any remedy for that? If one such beast soared over King's Landing, raining fire, we have no scorpions that large, no cunning ploy. We'd burn. It's rumored freedmen have entire flights. This dwarfs even Aegon's might. Robert's expression soured. We fight as we always have, Merton, with ballistae, cunning, or alliances. Or perhaps, if Daenerys remains amicable, we never need face such a nightmare. Let's not borrow trouble. Prepare, yes, but do not despair. That's an order. Merton nodded, stepping away. As the lords dispersed, Robert and Ned left the throne room, gold cloaks trailing behind them, and made for the council chambers. Passing torchlit corridors, Robert grumbled about the endless complexities of foreign politics. Ned listened, the tacit anchor to the king's frustration. In the council chambers, once they settled, Renly, Varys the spymaster, Stannis, who had arrived in King's Landing for the meeting but spoke little during it, and a handful of other advisors assembled. Robert recounted the gist of the conversation with the Free City's envoys. Stannis sat, arms rigid, face stoic. I find it likely that if Slaver's Bay has fallen so swiftly, the next step is Volantis. We all know Volantis is proud, steeped in old slave traditions. If Daenerys or this Varos truly demands an end to slavery across Essos, Volantis may fight. If they lose, the freedmen's cause prevails. Then the entire East might unify behind Daenerys. That would yield a force unlike anything we can imagine. Renly tapped his fingers on the table. So the question remains, do we root for Volantis to resist, or do we remain aloof? If Volantis fights and loses quickly, Daenerys emerges unstoppable. If it fights and somehow holds out, maybe that saps her strength. But we risk a massive war. The free cities might unify either for or against them, plunging Essos into chaos. Westeros may be forced to pick a side. Could that chaos bleed into our shores with dragons overhead? Ned frowned. We do not know Daenerys' heart now that Varos shapes her realm. She once cared for the realm enough to fight at Winterfell. But that was before she discovered these enclaves of old Valyria, these new dragons. Power can change a person. If freedmen worship them as saviors, how might that feed her ambition? Or Varos's, for that matter. The Red Priests proclaim a new age under the Lord of Light that might overshadow any old alliances. Robert slapped the table with an open palm. Gods be good. I never wanted to dabble in Essos' affairs. Let them keep their freedmen's councils. Let them unify or not. But if they think to cross the sea, we show them the might of the Seven Kingdoms. That's my stance. We hold fast, we strengthen our fleets, watch the coasts. I'm not about to dispatch an army across the sea on rumor alone. Varys cleared his throat softly, speaking in a near whisper. Then I shall double our little birds in pentos, liss, and bravos. If Volantis is threatened, we'll hear of it. If a fleet sets sail from Slaver's Bay, we'll know. Meanwhile, we remain calm. Agreed. Robert jerked his head in grudging approval. Aye. That's it. Let the free cities do what they will. We keep an ear open. If Daenerys or Varos tries to meddle with Westeros, we unite the realm once more. We overcame the White Walkers. Dragons or not, will not yield. Stannis' cold voice broke in. Let us not forget the possibility that Varos's power surpasses any mortal boundary. If these reports are true, his dragons are monstrous, freedmen's legions unstoppable, and the Lord of Light's faith spreads like wildfire. We risk facing a foe beyond normal measure. We must be resolute. Robert nodded grimly. We will be. Ned, ensure the North remains vigilant. Stannis, see that our navy in the narrow sea is well drilled. Renly, keep an eye on the southern lords. If the day comes, we'll call our banners. For now, though, enough talk. We watch, we wait. We hope the day never arises." The meeting concluded. Lords and advisors exited, leaving Ned and Robert in the quiet hush of the chamber. Robert sank into a chair, setting aside his warhammer. "Ned, sometimes I yearn for the simpler days. My rebellion, though bloody, was clear-cut. The White Walkers, terrifying though they were, forced us to unite. Now this? A political tangle across the sea, with unstoppable dragons rumored to overshadow even Balerion. Blasted nonsense, yet we can't ignore it." Ned put a comforting hand on Robert's shoulder. "We'll manage, old friend. The realm overcame threats before. We have reason to believe Daenerys is not some mindless tyrant. Let us trust in that while remaining prepared. And Varos, well, I can't read him. But if Friedman's counsels are the cornerstone of his expansion, maybe they won't turn their eyes to Westeros." Robert let out a gruff laugh. "We shall see, Ned. We shall see." Then, with a weary wave, he signaled for Ned to leave him. Ned departed, mind-churning. The memory of that meeting with the Free City's envoys lingered, especially the question of how mortal men could stand against dragons bigger than Balerion. The notion haunted him. Over the next days, the foreign envoys concluded their business and departed King's Landing. Some left with a measure of dissatisfaction, feeling that Robert's stance was too non-committal. Others recognized that Westeros's caution was at least better than apathy. They carried letters from Ned and Robert to their home councils, affirming that the Seven Kingdoms would remain watchful but not sign an immediate military alliance. Meanwhile, whispers spread among King's Landing's populace. Small folk asked, "Is another Targaryen invasion looming? Are these dragons truly larger than the legends? And who is this Varos rumored to be a living flame?" Ned busied himself forging new lines of communication with allied houses, discreetly urging them to maintain readiness without inciting panic. The memory of the White Walkers spurred some houses to comply, figuring that any threat from across the sea might unify the realm again if necessary. Others scoffed, believing no foreign force would dare cross the sea to face a kingdom of near 1,000,000 swords. Yet the mere rumor of monstrous dragons sowed a sliver of unease. The name Balerion the Dread, once the terror of an entire continent, evoked primal fear. If these freedmen raised beasts even mightier, what chance did any fortress stand? Robert took to the training yard more often, venting frustration by smashing straw targets with his warhammer. He raged about damned foreign wars and how the realm just got done burying the dead from the White Walkers. But after each sweaty session, he'd ask Ned if any new raven arrived from Pentos or if the Iron Bank of Bravos had changed its stance. Ned would respond in the negative. All quiet for now. A lull in the storm. One afternoon, Ned strolled through the Red Keep's gardens, accompanied by Renly, who commented lightly on how the realm might endure another war. "We overcame the others, we overcame the Targaryens once, we overcame the Greyjoys in their rebellion. If Daenerys wages war with unstoppable dragons, well, we'd muster. The question is whether we'd have time to muster before half the realm is aflame." Ned's countenance remained grave. "Precisely. If Friedman's legions number in the hundreds of thousands, combined with dragons said to overshadow entire towns, we might stand no chance in a direct confrontation. Our best strategy might be to treat with them or rely on cunning. But that's speculation. Without knowing Daenerys's real intentions, we can't plan properly." Renly shrugged, glancing at a rosebush. "Then we do as Robert decreed, we watch. We wait. The day we hear she or Varos readies a fleet is the day we ring the bells. Perhaps by then, the free cities join us or stand aside. Perhaps they unify with them. No one can say." As the weeks rolled on, no sign of invasion emerged. Instead, sporadic tidings reached King's Landing that Volantis and the Freedmen's Empire edged closer to confrontation, though no open war had erupted yet. The Red Priests in Volantis preached the Lord of Light's coming dominion, fueling tension with the Triarchs. Ned reported these updates to Robert, who merely grunted. "Let them fight. If Varos crushes Volantis, we'll know his might is unstoppable. Then we brace ourselves." Meanwhile, certain Westerosi lords, hearing the claim that Daenerys's dragons dwarfed Balerion, took a gloomier outlook. They quietly urged Robert to gather a formal war council, but he resisted, not wanting to spark panic. Each day, the realm carried on. Harvests reaped, trade caravans roamed, small folk toiled, and the memory of the White Walkers receded like a bad dream. Yet Ned and Robert both recognized that this peace sat on a precarious fault line. Eventually, news arrived of a Braavosi ship docking at Dragonstone, bearing envoys who sought to speak with the crown about potential ways to deter Varos's expansions. Ned traveled to Dragonstone in Robert's stead, receiving the envoys in the island fortress. Stannis, who guarded the citadel, hosted them with characteristic sternness. The Braavosi repeated the same concern. If Freedman's legions overrun Volantis, the rest of Essos might tumble like dominoes. They inquired whether Westeros would intervene or remain aloof for the final time. Ned gave the same cautious response. The king will not act unless threatened, but we stand prepared if Daenerys or Varos set eyes on the Seven Kingdoms. We do not wage preemptive war in foreign lands, lacking proof of hostility. The Braavosi envoys left, uncertain whether Westeros's neutrality would embolden Varos or hamper him. They carried word back that the crown preferred watchful waiting. Thus, time meandered without explosive events, though tension coiled beneath the surface. Men in taverns whispered about the unstoppable Freedman Empire and dragons bigger than castles, while the lords tried to maintain stoic calm. Some recalled how the realm had barely survived the White Walkers, courtesy of Daenerys's intervention. Opinions split. Perhaps she remained an ally at heart, perhaps not. Robert, more than once, spat curses about Targaryens and how they always complicated the realm. Yet he also muttered grudging recollections of how Daenerys's dragons helped defeat the dead. That memory tempered his aggression. In King's Landing's corridors, Varys the spymaster quietly orchestrated an expanded web of informants in Essos, feeding Ned scraps of rumor. One rumor insisted that freedmen's councils thrived in each city, that no slaves remained in Slaver's Bay, that Daenerys reigned with surprising leniency, and that Varos continued to dispatch new dragons to guard every corner. Another rumor suggested a fraction of the old slaver lords plotted in secret, though their chances were slim. The greatest rumor, though, repeated incessantly. Some dragons had grown so large they blackened the sky in flight, stirring recollections of Balerion's monstrous presence. It was enough to knot the stomach of any Westerosi lord with a sense of history. During one private session, Ned confided in Robert. If indeed these dragons outsize Balerion, no castle stands safe from a single pass of flame. The freedmen's legions might not even be necessary to subjugate a region. How do we strategize? Robert fixed him with a heavy stare. We do as we must. We've ballistae, scorpions, cunning. The old Targaryens fell eventually, yet I'd rather avoid that fight altogether. If only Daenerys would send a sign that she holds no grudge. But silence persists. Ned sighed. Then we remain on guard. The day may yet come when Varos or Daenerys clarifies their ambition. If they only aim at Essos, we can watch from afar. But if they covet the Iron Throne... He paused, letting the unspoken words linger. Robert thumped his warhammer's handle on the floor. Then we fight. We overcame nightmares once. We'll do it again. That's the best we can say for now. And so the uneasy peace stretched. The lords of Westeros, from the north to Dorne, maintained an undercurrent of readiness, each house receiving ravens from King's Landing that spelled out the possibility of conflict but no immediate mobilization. The free cities, meanwhile, grew anxious as rumors of Volantis' near capitulation circulated. Some envoys trickled back, spinning tales that Volantis was teetering on the brink of war with Daenerys if they refused to end slavery. Bravos insisted on neutrality, though the Iron Bank watched developments with cold logic. Lys, Myr, Tyrosh all hedged their bets. Westeros' stance, merely watchful, did little to quell the rising tension. Within the Red Keep's stony confines, the notion of dragons bigger than Balerion persisted like a dark myth. Courtiers whispered that freedmen boasted unstoppable might and that Westeros' bravado in Robert's rebellion meant nothing if an entire brood of gargantuan dragons soared from the east. Some lords recommended forging new Scorpion ballista designs. Others recommended seeking secret alliances with mercenary companies in Essos to sabotage Varos. Robert, fatigued by such counsel, repeatedly put them off. "We wait for real proof," he said. "I'm not marching half the realm across the sea on hearsay." Ned found himself longing for simpler days in the north. The swirl of rumor and dread weighed upon him. Yet he carried out his duties, ensuring the realm's stability, quietly praying that Daenerys might truly remain an ally at heart, or at least not transform into a conqueror bent on revenge. He recalled the old bond they once shared in the North's war against the undead, her dragons, her sacrifice. Could that spirit endure? Or had Varos's unstoppable fire overshadowed her? At times, Ned walked the keep's outer walls at twilight, gazing across the Blackwater Bay. If something stirred in Essos, no sign reached his eyes, only the black waters lapping against the rocky shores. He wondered if the day might come when a horizon of colossal dragons rose to blacken King's Landing's sky. Shivers lanced his spine. He carried the memory of the White Walker's near-apocalyptic threat, reminding him that the realm overcame worse. But was that purely luck? Finally, late one evening, a raven from Pentos arrived, bearing cryptic words. "Volantis stands on the brink of surrender or war with freedmen. The Red Priests gather. The freedmen's empire is unstoppable. Triarchs weigh compliance. Dragons rumored in the skies near the Roynes Delta, bigger than known memory." Ned read the letter to Robert in private. The king listened, face drawn. "So it begins," Robert muttered. "Either Volantis yields or we have a war in Essos. If they yield swiftly, Friedman's empire grows unstoppable. If they fight, maybe they drain each other. But what if Friedman's power only grows with victory?" Ned responded softly, "That's the crux. This letter suggests the Triarchs might bend out of fear, not wanting their city scorched by monstrous dragons. Friedman's councils could then supplant the ruling class. If that happens, they essentially unify the largest city in Essos under Daenerys and Varos. That leaves only the smaller city-states to resist. Soon, the entire East stands under their banner." Robert closed his eyes, weariness radiating from him. "Then all we can do is wait. If that day arrives, if they unify Essos fully, then perhaps they'll look beyond. Or perhaps not. If they do, we muster. Summon the lords, unite the fleets, hope for a miracle." Ned's heart felt heavy. He recalled the disbelieving talk that the Freedmen's dragons overshadowed Balerion. If so, all the fleets and armies in Westeros might prove futile. But he kept that despair from his voice. "Yes, we prepare quietly. May the Seven shield us from that outcome." And so, the realm settled into a tense vigil. Lords across Westeros drilled their men more frequently. The king's small council orchestrated new Scorpion designs, albeit discreetly, so as not to stoke the small folks' panic. The days turned to weeks with no sign of immediate invasion. But the dread that overshadowed everything was the persistent rumor. Dragons bigger than Balerion. If Balerion had once carved out an entire kingdom, how insurmountable was a freedman empire that commanded multiple beasts of such scale? No fortress or castle could stand if they truly soared overhead en masse. In the hush of King's Landing's corridors, Ned Stark privately told Robert, "If the Freedman's empire is as unstoppable as rumored, perhaps we should attempt direct contact with Daenerys, or even Varos. We might remind her of the bond forged in the war against the dead. She once considered alliances for the realm's sake. If we remain silent, we risk stoking misunderstandings." Robert, exhausted, gave him a long stare. "I'll consider it, Ned. But I can't force a raven to reach her if she's hidden behind an ocean of freedmen and dragons. We can attempt a letter to Pentos or Bravos, see if they can pass it on. But I suspect if Daenerys or Varos wanted to reassure us, they would have done so. The silence may speak volumes." So a letter was penned, though with uncertain prospects. An appeal to Daenerys Targaryen, referencing the memory of their joint struggle in the north, urging clarity on her intentions, and reminding her that Westeros bore her no malice if she had no designs on the Seven Kingdoms. It was dispatched to Pentos, entrusted to a Braavosi contact. Whether it would ever reach Daenerys was a matter of chance. Meanwhile, the realm continued its daily life, overshadowed by the possibility of a cataclysmic confrontation. Some among the court whispered that Robert might soon pass from the world, worn down by stress, drink, and an expanding waistline. Others speculated that if war erupted, Stannis or Renly might lead armies. But all recognized that if Friedmund's dragon soared across the narrow sea, the nature of war itself would change. The question hammered in every mind: how can we stand against dragons bigger than Balerion the Dread? In the hush of his private solar, Ned reflected on the memory of Daenerys' earlier acts of mercy, of how she personally risked Drogon in the battles against the White Walkers. Could that same woman have embraced a near-fanatical creed of Friedmund's empire under Varys' flame? Or did she remain the same queen who believed in forging a better world? The realm's hopes might hinge on the answer. For now, he and Robert could only prepare, watch, and pray that if war came, some chance for parley might avert the utter devastation that threatened to eclipse even the darkest days of the realm's history. Thus ended another day in King's Landing, the city's walls bathed in twilight. The small council had done all it could, forging loose ties with the free cities that dreaded Varos, encouraging Westeros's lords to stand guard. But a quiet dread lingered. The memory of the White Walkers still haunted the realm, a reminder that mortal strife pales before unstoppable power. Dragons of a monstrous scale might rival that sense of hopelessness, bringing flame instead of ice. And so the lords and small folk alike asked each other in hushed tones, how do we stand against dragons bigger than Balerion? No one had an answer, yet the wheels of fate turned. The realm held its breath, uncertain whether it would greet the dawn of a new era or the cataclysmic end of the old.